Thank you very much for joining us on the Joy News channel. And this afternoon, our focus is very simple. It's the second IMANI GIZ Reform Dialogue under the theme Ghana's Digitalization Agenda and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So I know we've been talking about the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We've talked about how it's a way of describing the blurring of boundaries between physical, digital, and biological worlds, a fusion of advances in artificial intelligence, robotics, and the Internet of Things. This afternoon, our focus is on a few things, and we're asking ourselves very critical questions when it comes to Ghana's digitalization agenda and its effect or impact on all of us. We ask these very simple questions. One, what are the policy coherence of government in relation to the digitalization and broadly the Fourth Industrial Revolution? We also find out the transparency and disclosure associated with the government's digitalization agenda, and does the recent introduction of the e-levy, what many of you have described as the Momo tax, constitute an own goal or enabler? We also would want to find out how prepared is Ghana's private sector to take advantage of Africa's rising digital economy, and how does the country close the digital divide and the huge investment gap, as well as higher data usage cost? And finally, how connected is Ghana's digitalization drive to her business and investment climate? My name is Winston Amwen. I'll be in charge of this ceremony. I'll be moderating the panel discussion, who would start shortly. But first, I talked about how whether the implementation of the e-levy is an own goal or an enabler. And the IMANI team has been conducting some research, and it's time for us to listen to the team that conducted the research as they present the research. And shall we, with a round of applause, invite Carl Tonam Duho, who is research consultant at IMANI, as he presents the survey results on the e-levy.
Thank you, Winston. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. We are here to discuss these critical issues, but what we did as a team was to look at some of the critical issues, especially on the e-levy, and then do some empirical analysis so that whatever we'll be discussing will be based on some hardcore data, and then for us to have some core analysis and discussions that will benefit all of us. So the presentation I'll be doing will be on the impact of the 1.5% tax on electronic transactions, which is the e-levy on Ghanaians, and the coping strategies. So we'll look at what is the impact, how the people are receiving the e-levy, what is the impact on them, and then the coping strategies that they are using. The objective of some of these kind of works is to explore public opinion to help shape public policy. When we look at some of the various policy documents that we have, for example, the Cashlight roadmap that Ghana developed, before that work was done, there were a lot of research that were done, a lot of survey to explore what is the state of affairs, to sort of build a baseline. And that's what we did in this contest, to build some baseline, because that has not been done to this extent yet. So there's a team of us that did this work. A lot of support was received from Dr. Tio Champon, Professor Bob Quinn, Mr. Franklin Kujo, and then myself. We worked together on it to provide some insights for us today. So this is the outline of the presentation that I'll be doing. I'll touch on the motivation of the study briefly, then the research questions, the methodology that we used, then the demographic findings that we got, and then the perspectives of the people on the e-levy, and also the impact on the digital financial services, and then the coping strategies. And then we draw some conclusion based on what government was saying earlier during the implementation. We understand that it is a kind of a phase-based implementation, but then what was government saying, and then what was the issue on the ground, and then what can government do to shape it? That will be something I will look at. So there's a statement from Winston Churchill that says that I contend that for a nation to try to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle. The point about tax is that it is critical, and tax issues have to be based on data. because there's an optimal way of doing it. If you overtax, the impact of the economy can also go some way. But then if you don't tax also, you'll not be able to raise the needed revenue. So it calls for a lot of thinking, a lot of calculations, a lot of deliberations for us to really shape some policy. What's the motivation of the study? What we saw was that there was the introduction of the e-levy. And then we saw that finally the Electronic Transfer Levy Act of 2020, which is at 1075, was enacted. And that took effect in May 2022. What it does for those of us who might not be aware of it is that it charges 1.5% on transactions, transfers. That is not on the fees. In some countries, this kind of percentages are on the fees. But in our context, it's on the transfer. But then there is also a kind of an allowance for a daily allowance of about 100 cedis, which is about $12.5 US. Now, the basis of government introducing this has been based on four key areas. One is on the government has been arguing that, okay, let me start it this way. The first point is that government argues that the purpose here is to tax industry. So that's the first point. But then there are four key points that they are looking out to. They are saying that it is to help them to pay government contractors. It is also to help them to support entrepreneurship, cyber security issues, and digital security issues. And then it's also to help in developing road infrastructure. And then it's also to help create jobs for about 11 million people. But then for us as policy analysts, we have been asking questions that will the government be able to rope in the estimated amounts, the attrition rate that government was mentioning? Is it right? And then what are the assumptions that on which some of those calculations were made? What is the situation on the ground? And then to what extent would citizens' behavioral changes affect the implementation and then the purpose of the e-levy altogether? So based on that, we came together to explore three key research questions. The first one is, what's the perspectives of Ghanaians on the introduction of the e-levy? The second is, what's the impact of the e-levy on the use of digital financial services in Ghana? And then the last is, what's the coping strategies for using digital financial services after the implementation of the e-levy in Ghana? The research benefited from a lot of deliberations, a lot of deep thinking, exploration of the literature, and then the policy issues, and then looking at the Ghanaian context, learning from other African countries, Kenya, Tanzania, other countries that have implemented this sort of taxes, and then what's the context, and then we try to explore that. But the survey design is more quantitative, ordinal data, multiple choice, in a way that we can develop some kind of modeling, some kind of calculations, even beyond the pure statistics. We can do some modeling to do some kind of logistic analysis, something that we can use to predict that was the probability of this happening or not. Then also, we also dwelt on public opinion, knowing that can also help in shaping policy. Then, on the research instrument, we developed a 32-question instrument that is based on theory and a review of the literature, and then the policy, and then some engagement with practitioners. And then we conducted a pilot study that we got some insights, and then we used that to finalize our instruments. And then we did some controlling, because we understand that in collecting data for this kind of online work, sometimes people can go and fill the form multiple times and all of that. So we use a special tool, which is the Smart Survey, which has that kind of IP, Internet Protocol feature, for each person to fill the form once. There are a number of things that we looked at. The survey window was 2.5 weeks. It started May 30th and ended 17th June. And then also, we got about 1,677 respondents. And based on the population size of 31%, we saw that is statistically good, because that gives us a 2% margin of error, and then 95% confidence level. So what it means is that the results we are going to share are things that can be used to do some kind of generalization based on the category of people that we have surveyed. And then also we noted the demographics of the people. So the people that we have interviewed, because we did not go house to house, we are not able to look at a charcoal seller who is actually not using on internet. So we are not able to get that. But we understand that the people that we interviewed, they have some kind of connection to some of these people that are the pro-poor population. So the insights are also relevant for them. So we are calling them kind of formal wage economy class that we have surveyed. And then also we saw that 13.8% of them are female, and then 86.2% of them are male. Then also we saw the voting status, because we tried to look at some kind of their political background also to some extent. We saw that 96.4% of them are people that are having voting status. These are some demographics that I would just like to highlight briefly. So the age, a lot of them are between the ages of 26 to 55 years. And then a lot of them are formally educated. So you see a lot of them are first degree holders and master's degree PhD holders. What it means is that the quality of these responses are something that is noteworthy. They are very good. And then also you see the income stream also very huge. That is also very huge there. Then there's a tweak that we saw on the political space. We see that pro-NDC people are at 18.9%, pro-NPP are 13%, non-affiliated 47.8%, prefer not to disclose 18.6%. But we are of the view that some of the people that are in between, they prefer not to say, not to disclose, or not affiliated, may be aligned to some of those political parties. But maybe for the purpose of this, they end up falling in that bracket. Then also the professional status. A lot of them are people that are employed. Some of them are self-employed, and then some part-time workers. So you see that these are people that are actually driving the economy, that are engaged in economic activities. We see the various sectorial breakdown also. A lot of them are from education, some of them government sector, a lot of them also from the financial sector, and then healthcare sector being the fourth. So the spread of the people. Then also the regional breakdown. A lot of them are from Greater Accra, followed by Kumasi, which is the Ashanti region, is to say Volta region to some extent, and then the northern, and then the rest of them are spread across. Now, we want to delve into what they have shared, what is their perspectives on the various questions that we shared to them. When we asked them whether they are registered with any digital platforms, they indicate 98.9% of them indicated that they have one or two platforms that they are on. And we see the breakdown of the platforms over here. A lot of them are MTN, followed by Vodafone, followed by Airtel. This is kind of representative of the market share, not by the numbers, but by the order. You see a lot of them are representative. And then also some of them are on the bank apps. And then some of them are also on the fintech and then other platforms as well. Then we also asked them that what type of transactions do they typically carry out? Because that will also help us, because government is indicating that the aim is to tax industry. What are some of how do they use some of these things? And we understand, and we realize that a lot of them are using it for personal purposes, 55.3%. We see that 32.8% of them are using it for businesses, and then 9.4% for government activities, but government payments. And you realize that government payments are exempted from the e-levy as much as possible. So what we are seeing is almost two times of what we are seeing at the what 2 times 2 of this. We'll delve into that in detailed later. Then also we look at the factors that underpin the use of the digital financial services before and after. Because we want to understand that what are the factors? Why are you using the digital financial services? Why are you using Momo? Is it because of risk issues? Is it because of the costs? Is it because of convenience? And what we found is that convenience stood out, both before and after. So, but then you see that before, which is the blue one, is higher than what we had, which was after was 44.19%. But then what we saw interesting was the change with regards to the security concern and the transfer cost. What you see is that before, security was the second highest concern. But after the enactment of the e-levy, we saw that the transfer cost became critical. So the people are looking at the transfer cost. Is the cost high? If the cost is high, I don't want to use. If it's not high, I want to use. Then also we looked at the support that the people have for the e-levy. We want to understand how to what extent are they in support or not in support of them. So we realized that 80.3% of them are strongly against it. And then we saw that 5.6% of them are for it. And then about 13% of them are those people who still like it because they believe that there are some the economic development impact of the e-levy. Then what we did was to look at how much they will be willing to pay as e-levy, because that was something. It was introduced as 1.7%, and then later on it was changed. So we wanted to also understand that how much would they like to pay? You see that majority of them are not ready to actually pay anything at all. But then that is followed by people who feel like they want to pay something less than 1%, not more than 1%. Then also you see people who want to pay something less than 5%. So from that 1% to 1.49% is fine for them. Then the rest of them, which is about 3.4% of them, are people who are either ready to pay the 1.5 we have now or to even pay more, above 2%. Then we also delve into those who are saying they are in support and those who are saying they are against. What are the factors driving it? Because we don't just want to say you support or not. We want to understand why. For those who are for it, they indicate that it allows government to take more tax. And then some of them also indicate that it's also a way to broaden the tax net. These are some discussions that government, through policy engagement, have been raising across board. But then also there are people who are against it. They raise a number of concerns. You see that 32.2% of them indicate that any money collected will go into leaking buckets. So there are issues about accountability that are coming up. And then also 32% of them indicate that government can cut down the wasteful expenditure. You see also that 23.5% of them indicated that Ghanaians are already overtaxed. There are different tax handles that are there already that government is using. And then some other people have other concerns that are varied. Then we also went ahead to ask the volume of transaction, because government indicated that what is their projection is that for the first, after the implementation, first 3 to 6 months, the attrition rate will be about 24%, which means that the people will adjust about 24% lower for the transaction. So we wanted to know to what extent are they reducing transactions? What is MTN's direct data saying? What is Vodafone's direct data saying? But then what is the opinion of the people? Because that also relates. When we don't have those kind of hardcore data, we can also get some insight from this. So we see that so for now, a lot of people are still stuck in the system. They are still using the transactions. So you see that only 7.6% say they are not using at all. Maybe they have been able to adjust to other systems. But 30.3%, above 30% of them are still using either 1 to 2 times in a week, or 2 to 5 times, or even more than 5 times. They are still using it. So the usage is still there. Then also we asked them the volume, has their volume of transaction changed? So we saw that 82.7% of them indicated that their volume of transaction has changed over the period. But then we asked them that to what extent has this volume changed? Because government's calculation is that 24% of them will be, the volume will have changed by about 24%. But I want to get from the ground based on their opinion. And we saw that a lot of them, so first of all, I want to pick from the highest one. More than about 50% of them indicated that the volume of transaction has reduced by about 51% to 100%. Then you pick those who 22% of them indicated that it has even increased more than 100%. So if you combine this and then with the ones that have about 10 to 50%, you see that is the 24% calculation might not be possible. We may have to corroborate this with the hardcore data that is trickling in. But this is what is on the field. Then what we did is to kind of cross-tabulate to see what is the interaction. What you see over here is some kind of concentration of the data points over here. What it means is that a lot of those people that are saying it has reduced by 10%, 10 to 50%, 51% to 100%, a lot of them, and then also more than 100%, a lot of them also are the people that are engaging in a lot of the transactions. So there are implications of that the volume might have reduced, the value also will have impact on it. And then what would then be the impact on the calculations that government did that they want to raise this amount of tax levy revenue? Those are the questions that we have to ask. Then also we ask about whether they transferred the burden of payment, because we understand that there are some people who are actually doing this for business, and then some people have a way to. So we want to ask that what is the incidence? Who is bearing the burden? You see that only about 23% of them indicate that they are able to transfer it. A lot of them are bearing it directly by themselves. We also got some coping strategy. How are the people adjusting? In what ways? What are the things that are driving them to be able to reduce the value and the volume, so as to give some kind of insight for policy to shape, so that by the time we get to the full implementation, whether we want to scrap it or to continue it, is still something that government has to look at. But the data has to speak for itself, and the data-driven policy making is something that we are calling for as a country. So what we ask them is that we ask them whether. We ask them whether they do consider strategically the 100%, the 100 cedis allowance when they are making the transactions. And you see that about 73.9%, about 74% of them indicate that whenever they are trying to transact, they have in mind this kind of 100%. So if I have to transfer 300 cedis and I'm not hard pressed to send it today, I can send 100 cedis today, send it tomorrow next, and then that covers it. So that I'll just avoid the e-levy. So there are some of these kind of behavioral issues that are on the field. And then also we ask them whether they consider spreading the small amount across days to escape the e-levy directly. And we saw that 69% of them indicated that they are doing that. Then also we ask them what alternative means do they have to use for the e-levy payments. So what are the alternatives? So if you are reducing the volume, you are reducing the value, what other channels are you using to be able to do it? Are you using cash? Are you using traditional banking? Or you're able to go and do whatever means are they using? And then we saw that a lot of them are using the cash payment now. There are implications of some of these things on impact on security and all of that, but those are issues that we can discuss now. So 43.8% of them indicated that they are using cash. Then about 18% of them indicated that they are using the traditional banking services. And then about 20% of them indicated that they are able to interact with the vendors and the agents and be able to see how they can maneuver and then be able to avoid the e-levy. So there are some of those things there. So in summary, what we have found is, just to highlight whatever I've said, we saw that the volume of transaction has reduced significantly over the period. And then also we saw that a lot of the people are using the mobile money for personal, although we understand that there are some business aspects also. But then a lot of the people that we surveyed are using it for personal purposes. Then also we saw that 83% of them indicated that the volume has reduced for them. And there are interesting things that we can look at over there. So despite the estimated official attrition rate of 25%, what we are seeing does not show that is what we are having. So we are having more people that are avoiding. The volume may be reduced more than what is estimated earlier. The value may be reduced more than what is estimated earlier. And then the forecasts that were also made may not be met. So these are some of the critical things. When data starts coming from Bank of Ghana, these are things that we will look at and see, do some comparison. And then we hope that policymakers will be able to look at it and then will help shape the policy very well. Then also we have some other things. So we saw that there's a strong elasticity from the people. So the people are able to change very strongly, very significantly in this context. Maybe that's not what was expected, but that's what's happening. Then also they are able to use some alternative means. 85.9% of them indicated that they are not in support even to start with altogether. And then 13 percent of them indicated that they are somehow in support, and then we understand that the reasons for whether they are in support or not are based on, for those who are in support, is because of the impact for the government to raise revenue. But then those who are against are indicated that there are a lot of public accountability and then also waste cutting that has to be addressed by the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, King Carl Tonam Duho, for that wonderful presentation, concluding that, a lot of Ghanaians have decided to use alternative means of avoiding the e-levy. Fortunately for us, this afternoon, joining the conversation is Isaac Amwakon, who is head of Project Management Unit of the Ghana Revenue Authority. Let's give him a round of applause. He's been one man who's engaged a lot of the media and a lot of you when it comes to discussions concerning the e-levy. He has lots of answers when it comes to the e-levy. And so when I go around for your thoughts, I'll start off with you on what you make of the presentation. I'm just informing you in advance. Thank you. Also joining the discussion is Salom Brantia, who's Global Strategy Director of M-Pedigree and a Vice President of IMANI. Thank you very much, Salom. We're also joined here by Dr. Augustine Blay, who is Executive Secretary to the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana. Thank you very much, Doc, for joining us. And Maximus Ametogo is CEO of Pop Out. Thank you very much, Maximus, for joining us. Before we get into the conversation about the Ghana's digitalization agenda and the fourth industrial revolution, let me just take your thoughts on the presentation by Carl. Starting off with you, Isaac Amwako. You can turn it on? Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think it is a good presentation. It's giving us insights. I sit at the implementation side, so I get to understand some of the thoughts of the public. So that would be my initial thoughts.
I'm just curious. The last time I spoke to you, you were talking about how you sit behind and you see the figures, and from the very first week of implementation, you were very excited. When you look at the figures you see, does it in any way correspond to what we're being told today?
That is for another day. We are still churning data. I don't think it's too early.
Oh, it's too early?
Yes.
Okay. It's been about, almost 2 months. I think we can have a fair idea, unless you don't want to say anything. Let me get to Maximus.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant presentation from IMANI, and just a clear expression of what the customers feel, and an initial, pointer to what may happen or what needs to be changed when it comes to the electronic transfer levy. I think we have to be clear that it's a transfer levy, not just a transaction levy.
And have you reached the conclusion already that a lot of things must change?
I think there are different ways of modeling this. In fact, we could have used maybe a subscription-based model. And if I send maybe 100 cedis free, if I send 1,000 cedis, I pay a fixed amount maybe every month. If I pay more than 5,000, I pay also a fixed amount. And you can get the same revenue government wants to get if the calculation is done properly, right? But we need to pay taxes.
I see Isaac nodding to that. Let me get to you, Salom Brantier.
Yes, of course, this is a very good presentation. I think this is one of the first empirical studies, if I stand to be corrected, but this is probably one of the first empirical studies publicly since the whole e-levy tax was implemented. And I believe that for some of us who were, commenting publicly about the e-levy, I think this is very much in, correlation with what we thought would happen. And it clearly shows that there is a lot that needs to be done if this tax is going to really achieve its desired objectives, as well as sit well with the people for whom this tax is supposed to help develop. So there are many other considerations in terms of how it is stunting, for example, digitalization, especially with the use of digital financial tools. And I believe that as the discussions go on, some of these things will come to light, because these are very, very important things if we want to look at redefining commerce or commercial activity in the years to come. And this tax probably, like you said at the beginning, is possibly an own goal, but there is still time. Maybe we are at the first quarter of the game, so there's probably still time for us to retool it and make it something that is much more in consonance with our economic objectives.
Thank you, Salom. But when you say, for those of you who had commented earlier, this is more of a corroboration of what you said. Are you by this saying you feel vindicated already?
I think this is not a time to possibly take a stand and say we are being vindicated about something or the other, because this is a continuing discussion. I believe that stakeholder management...
But you had concerns about it.
Yes, I believe that stakeholder management was poorly done, and this is evidence of it.
Great. Let me get to Dr. Augustine Blay, finally on initial comments before we continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to speak with you. The presentation was excellent. The sample of the research is good. I mean, the data reflects the views of the population in terms of the research. And so we'll wait to see what the actual data looks like. Clearly, when a policy is initially implemented, there's always a debate that goes on. There's also the communication needs to occur. People tend not to like to pay taxes, so I can understand the point about people looking for loopholes and stuff like that. No, but we'll see what the data comes out to show whether to confirm the research or not. Thank you.
But in the interim, you know, as you're Executive Secretary to the Vice President, and we know how the government talked about this, initially targeting some 6.9 billion, reducing it to 4.5 billion. The suggestion from the research shows that people are finding innovative ways in not paying the tax. Looking at the fact that we have budgeted some 4.5 billion that we believe would go a long way in helping our economy, are you worried that a lot of people are not paying taxes or are not paying the e-levy as we anticipated?
I don't want to say that I'm worried. I think we have to wait and see the data, because it's been 2 months since we started. Clearly, the research, it's a research, it's credible research. You have the sample size, the methodology is clear, showing that people are not comfortable with the e-levy, people look for loopholes. So it's a warning, right? So we can't dispute that. So we wait to see the actual data. Then government or policy makers will react to it.
Okay. Just finally on this, Isaac Amwakon, because the last time I spoke with you on the Super Morning Show on Joy FM, you said the first day, I'm repeating this because it was on radio, you said the first day, of implementation, one of the major, entities brought in some 1 million. Do I get the impression that you know daily, as you monitor the platform, what is happening? I'm not saying put a figure to it, but do you know daily the amounts that are coming in?
Yeah, we have a sense of the amount that's coming in, but as you yourself said, it's too early to give actual figures. Besides, we've told the charging entities that the actual data should come to the Ghana Revenue Authority on the last day of the following month. So that means for May e-levy collected, we haven't yet received the actual data for us to start analyzing. That should come somewhere 30th of June for us to receive the very first data, and that is not currently in. What we're seeing is the inflow side. We now to go into the actual data side.
Which made you happy at the time?
I'm still happy. Let me add one thing. It looks like we are so fixated on the indirect tax of e-levy. We've not availed our mind to the direct tax of e-levy. And I, being a tax practitioner, I'm looking at both. For the purposes of e-levy, we've been able to, being careful here, from one charging entity, we are looking at about almost 300,000 merchants whose data hitherto the GRA wasn't having. But for the purposes of e-levy, they've disclosed this information to us. We've done some data matching. We are even realizing that less than 1% of this 300,000 is what is on our database as taxpayers. So the two objectives of, because of e-levy, increasing the tax net is happening. And we would see some figures to that. That's for merchants. For agents, we have our association, the Agent Association. We are also in collaboration. Just one charging entity is also giving us more than 300,000 of agents who are also going to join the direct tax handle. So we shouldn't look at it from the indirect tax where the e-levy is coming in. Look at the direct tax aspect as well, and there are some potentials there as well.
And I'm sure this is what makes you happy.
Yes.
Great. So let me get into the conversation. That was just by way of, initial comments about the research. Later on, we'll probably talk about a thing or two about the e-levy, whether it's an own goal or an enabler. And I think you've set the tone already by indicating that maybe, just maybe, it could be an enabler. I don't know what the other panelists would say, but let me start off with you, Dr. Augustine Blay, and find out, from you, government's policy alignment in relation to its digitalization agenda and objectives of the fourth industrial revolution.
Thank you again. The key word is the fourth industrial revolution. I think we have to define that and then be able to speak to it properly. I'm sure many of you know what it is. I heard your definition of it. But we have to go back to seek, what was the first, second, third, and what were these three industrial revolutions seeking to achieve, and then see how government can do that based on your question. We know the first industrial revolution, based on the steam, was increased productivity. So it was mining the coal and all this stuff. Then you have the steam engine coming through, increased productivity. Then you went to the second one, which is the mass production. Again, increasing productivity and looking at the processes and making it better. I think that was the time where we have this scientific management concept coming up. Then we have the third, which is basically driven by automation and digitization. But now when you move to the fourth industrial revolution, we are looking at identifying modular component of technology, big data, AI, robotic, and then seeing those.
Doc, if you could kindly speak into the microphone for us. Yes, we'll be very grateful. Thank you very much.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I think it's better now.
All right. Okay. So when you get in the fourth industrial revolution, you're looking at using the modular components of technology across board. You have the robotic, you have the AI, you have the big data, you have the artificial intelligence. You're looking at these mature cloud computing, mature technology component, and now connecting them to achieve an objective. Again, looking at the industrial revolution, you're looking at first productivity increase, efficiency gain, and then of course comes the reduction of cost. But with the fourth industrial revolution, you're looking at a mature technology model, reducing the time it takes to produce, to deploy a product that has impact, larger impact. So unlike before where you have to be building software, it's taking about months to build them, now you're looking at how many modules, existing mature modules that exist in the world, can you combine to then make your processes more efficient and produce? Again, industrial revolution all driven by production side. So if we look at what government policy direction has been, let's look at this country, Ghana. What are the key modules that we can digitize or mature to allow the quick deployment of solution, right, in terms of digitization? Under the leadership of the president and the vice president, as all of you are aware, we're talking about first, let's make sure that the identity, when you talk about digitalization, identity is key. I'm sure all of you understand. All of our phones, all of our devices must have an identity. And now when you as an individual comes online, you must be identified. So the NIA project was a key. That was the first modular component in placing there in the architecture and say, let's make sure every Ghanaian is registered and then biometrically registered. So what that happened is that now you have this module there. Let's go across the economy. Everywhere, every system that depends on identity must then reference that identity model, right? Because remember, my point is that the fourth industrial revolution is about connecting mature modular component to quickly deploy solutions. So then we have the identity system in place. Then under the leadership of the vice president, the president said, okay, now let's make sure that we have the addressing component done. Now, in this country, if you want to find where somebody lives, right, the vice president talked about the cocoa seller direction. Now, if I go to ECG, I must provide an address. We don't have an addressing system. I go to Ghana Water, I must provide an address. We don't have an addressing system. I go to the bank, I must provide an address. We don't have an addressing system. So in almost every, when I go to the district assembly, I must provide an address. I don't have an addressing system. So again, you have the idea of, okay, let's also establish this modular component as part of the architecture so that somebody else, the fintechs or the IT companies, that can come in there and put these systems together and quickly deploy a solution to provide value. So we have this exercise of the digital address put in place, as you can see across the country. They are going around putting the plates on properties around the world, around the country. Then you move on to what is the next component that we must do, and I'm sure you've heard about Ghana.gov, which is find a way to make it easier for citizens to interact with government in terms of fees and stuff like that. I'll pause here and explain something to you. There is a concept called the maturity model in terms of e-government. You know, we have a catalog of services, we put them together. How many databases do we have? They are not talking among themselves. They are all separated, some in Excel, some in Fox Pro, some in Access, some in SQL, Oracle, completely separated, some on paper. So you face the first model, let's get a list of that. Then you move on, let's get a service. Then let's get a transactional. Let's have it a vertical transaction. Let's digitize one area. But when you get to the mature level of digitization, looking at horizontal integration of services. That is very important because when you come to deploying such services, what must you do? You're going to have to go across different agencies, different ministries, and that becomes very difficult. And I brought this point in to understand that each ministry and each agency has their mandate. But when it comes to digitization, within the concept of the fourth industrial revolution, you're looking at cutting across these different mandates, these different agencies, which in itself inherently has legal implications. Because you're looking at data points that traditionally existed in one sector in silo, legally protected, turf war around it. But when it comes to digitization, you are setting the data free and say, okay, the data that exists in your database is important to this particular agency. So let's try to synchronize it. And so you have this concept of Ghana.gov and say, okay, let's try a way and provide a platform, right, where we can cut across all the agencies and make it easier for citizens to pay for services, and on and on and on. So there are different modules that have been built into the system. Now, what is the next level? Again, within the concept of the fourth industrial revolution, taking mature modules that have been deployed, digital assets, and then quickly deploying solutions. So we are asking ourselves, okay, where else can you now take identity, take the addressing system, take the Ghana.gov system, take the mobile money interoperability system, take these modules that have been built, and then quickly deploy a solution. So I think this was my initial remarks. I'll take further questions later, unless you want me to keep going.
No, so I want to tell us that next level. You've talked about where are we taking these to?
Yes.
Where are we taking it to? What's the next level?
So you see, for example, which is I think sometimes you look at the knowledge supply chain, right? You're asking yourself, are Ghanaians competent enough to build these modules? Are Ghanaians competent enough to leverage these modules and quickly deploy solutions? I dare say that there are a lot of local companies, Ghanaian companies, MP Degree and others, a big company in terms of what they can achieve using cloud computing, for example, right? Using Amazon and Azure and other the AI component, for that they are sitting there in their offices and deploy solutions quickly, right? They're already doing that, and so now what we are saying is that what we have today, we have the identity system problem solved, the address system solved. We have the, now what are we doing? We say, okay, look, we have these databases at GRA. We spend a lot of time building the TIN number and all this stuff. Okay, wait a minute. We now have a database of identity, of NIA, identity of Ghanaians. Let's go to NIA and then merge that data. So what is happening now is now let's put these data together using the identity key. So now when you say me as a Ghanaian, and when you're talking where are we going, it's like there should come a point where we are saying that I owe DVLA, right? I owe fees at the GRA. I owe fees at the assembly level. I owe fees with government any place, that you should be able to have that information at the fingertip and pay for it. And the modules have been built for that. You understand? Because now what you have now, you have identity, what you have the address system, you have the payment platform integrated. So now you are saying, okay, once you merge this database using the identity information, you can now begin to get that information and say, okay, to me, Augustine Blay, ID number 1, what are my liabilities across government, which today we cannot do. You have people that drive vehicles, right, that commit all sorts of violations that there are no way of tracking them. Okay. Right? So now, because these modules are there, the next step is how do we quickly put them together and solve these problems? So the modules are there. Now the agencies, the private sector, in partnership with government, should be able to put them together and say, let's get it done.
Thank you very much, Augustine Blay. We'll get back to you later. So let's get to the private sector. And Augustine Blay ends on the point, now is the time. Take advantage of these models, come together and use them. Salom, how are you taking advantage of these models?
Well, that was a very interesting submission by Dr. Blay. So in listening to him and then him re-echoing basically a lot of the reasons behind the digitization drive, for a lot of us in the private sector, there are several questions that are still not very clear. There still doesn't seem to be the big picture in terms of benefits when it comes to the private sector. It looks like a lot of all this policy has been designed just to create avenues for revenue acquisition, revenue consolidation, revenue, my friend Isaac, what's the word? What do you call it?
Indirect tax or direct tax, the bigger picture.
Yeah, I'm talking about the spread of revenue, increasing the spread of revenue. Yes, so we have, our government probably is missing the ball in looking at a take approach and not looking at what can digitization give. When I say that with the reckoning that indeed everybody needs a digital identity. It is very, very critical and very, very important that we do have that digital identity as human beings, because it is now an extra layer of the kinds of interactions that we are going to have henceforth. So, of course, one of the most beautiful things about the changes in the tax approach or the mentality of the government and the GRA around taxation is the fact that all of us having TINs gives us a basis for us to know our obligations when it comes to tax, and we should be able to begin to streamline the mentality where we know that we have something to give back to government. Beyond that, if you look at the modular expansion of the digitization, as Dr. Blay has said, you would realize that most of it is just designed towards what the government can take. I think that there hasn't been enough in terms of the big picture, in terms of how these can reflect in expanding businesses that exist today, in expanding the rights of economic usage of several different types of resources and amenities. It does not have as much of a reflection on things that are very critical to our development going forward, like urban spatial planning, for example, in spite of the fact that there is an addressing system, we have not seen how that can transform into some kind of innovation in terms of governance related to things like urban spatial planning, which is a very, very critical issue right now because we have housing deficits and then we have problems with how to allocate resources to new settlements that are being built across the country. And these are some of the critical questions that need to be asked. It has not had, in spite of the millions of dollars that have been sunk into areas like land ownership, we have not seen any direct correlation or advantage or benefit that inures to people who want to own physical resources like land.
Okay, so how do you want it? How do you want it designed to help you in the private sector?
So yes, so the question here is, we the proponents of digitization need to look at it from multiple perspectives. I think the perspective has been one-dimensional. And even in the one-dimensional perspective, we are looking at the fact that stakeholders like those in the private sector, for example, who should have been deeply involved and immersed in these processes, because let's be real here. It is the private sector that is being used as a tool to actually collate the data and generate the revenue, right? Good. Now, if that is the case, then we need to really not use them as an afterthought. What is happening so far is that the private sector has been completely obliterated in the process of the consultations that have gone on, in a way where they are just an afterthought, kind of like a source of fuel. Let me pump you into the engine and let's see if you move. That is not how it works. The private sector is vibrant, is evolving, is innovating, and it is the one that is actually churning the output that is you are looking at to tax for several different things. In fact, the perspective of even how you are running the service structure of the government, we have not seen any overarching document that talks about government as a service and how that is really going to transform how we do business or help with the ease of doing business factors in this country. In fact, the opposite has occurred with the introduction of the e-levy because our economy is predominantly informal. You have the figures, you have the figures. Our economy is predominantly informal. What you have done currently in the iteration of the implementation that you have right now is the fact that now people are actually withdrawing from using newer methods and are now relying on old methods. Okay. Yes, so you are getting certain data points, but you are not getting your due because of the fact that the implementation has been forced, rushed, imposed upon people, and when that happens, rational people would find ways of rebelling against the system, and then the eventual objectives that you have will not be achieved.
Great, thank you, Salom. I'll get back to you, Dr. Augustine, but I see you're ready to react. But let me just take, Maximus' point also.
Just 1 minute.
Okay, 1 minute, sure, 1 minute.
I think he made a point, and then the premise of his point is what I wanted to
okay, no problem, go ahead.
Expand or
sure.
clarify. The digitalization agenda of the government or the president is not solely based on revenue collection. And I wanted to correct that, because there are other areas that we have done. For example, the NHIA renewal is an area where it's not based on revenue. It's based on the fact that in my area, in the Sefi West.
Doc, I'm told to remind you to speak into the microphone.
I'm not used to speaking in the microphone. It's a promotion. Okay, thank you. So you take the NHIA, for example. It is premised on the fact that you have people from Sefi in Western North area where they will leave their farms, come to the district office, sometimes spend 3 days waiting for the district officer to come and just renew their card because their son is sick or their husband is sick, And so by pushing the NHIA to say, look, use an ESSD and allow the people to just renew it, it was not that digitalization agenda was not driven by revenue, but driven by making life easier for the citizens. There are many examples like that, like the Senate, when the retirees, when they had to first go and fill a long form and wait for their payment, their pension. Again, by linking it to the NIA, and now they don't have to fill all these forms, and you have a lot of digitization solutions going on there as well, making their life easier. So no, it's not only for revenue. It's also for the betterment of the life, the quality of life of Ghanaians. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But since you're reacting, it talks about the fact that, yes, Dr. Blay, he makes the point that there is no big picture in terms of the benefit. Could you help address that, the bigger picture?
I think I made a point in my submission about a maturity model. You know, there's a certain level where first you must carry people along, and he mentioned the point that we are not carrying everybody along enough, right? But there is a certain level that you have to get. First, let's get the building blocks in place, right? And so the big picture conversation needs to occur. But fundamentally, you are saying that the country Ghana must be run as a technology company, fundamentally. The Vice President mentioned that when he asked the question, what's your vision about digitization to make Ghana the most technology country in Africa? Then you must look at your citizens as your customers, right? Now, with that premise, then everything internally changes, because now you're looking at how do I then begin to change the processes to make it easier? And there's a larger conversation that we need to have. And then the second point I want to make is that when you look at digitization, from the government perspective, there are two broad areas. The first area is looking into the government services, government process flows. How do we improve the processes to make them more efficient as government agencies? Okay. Then you say, what is the best way to allow the sector you're talking about, the private sector, and create the enabling environment for the private sector to also grow in a digital space? So these are two broad areas. And so larger conversation will have to occur. And I know that the Ministry of Communication has been engaging stakeholders to draft a document in that regard.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Blay. Let me get to you, Maximus. So Solomon, making his point, talked about how he sees all of these as just a creation for revenue generation. He doesn't see the bigger picture and its benefit. Do you feel same?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah, because you see, technology is not just government driven. A lot of people innovate. They think around solutions. And we use a lot of technologies even before government started some of the projects that they were doing. So Snow Code was developed before the GPS thing came, which works even offline, developed by a Ghanaian, right? But another project was developed for the addressing system. Fantastic stuff. But if you have the likes of, let's say, busy internet, they came and everybody was moving to the cafe to check their emails, print stuff. A lot of this digitalization was driven by the private sector. Government was almost absent, right? And I am excited that we have somebody like the Vice President championing the digitalization agenda. But the issue is that the bigger picture is missing. We don't know where the private sector fits in the government scope of things when it comes to digitalization. And most of the projects that Doctor mentioned, realize they are all revenue collection or making sure that you head everybody into the bracket of revenue collection for the government. But somebody who develops a simple app to solve a small problem in a community or in a particular sector will have a challenge getting funding and then government support. And a lot of companies have also died because there's no bigger picture, there's no funding to go to, there's no money chasing innovative ideas, right? And we have e-commerce, you have GIPC, fighting even foreigners about retailing. Meanwhile, somebody has a website with thousands of foreign products on it, and they are selling in millions of dollars right here in Ghana, and it's fine because it's digitalization, right? So how do we have that bigger picture? Last year, we spent about $3.8 billion on e-commerce alone in Ghana. How much did government get? If we had a bigger picture, I'm sure the person selling the electronic products, which had almost the highest amount, 1.3 billion spent on electronic products, and I'm not sure we manufacture electronic products in Ghana, right? Those are places that we can look out for so that when you have the private sector involved, it becomes easier, right, to get all those things done. Research shows that in 3 years' time, digital skills will be needed in the labor force, right? How are we reforming the educational sector so that we stop teaching old stuff to the students who are tech savvy, right? So the style of teaching and the content of teaching must also change. The educational sector, digitalization enables you to share one textbook with 1 million students instead of printing 5 million textbooks for 5 million students. So how are we making sure that we are building those sectors and infrastructure to be able to, put that bigger picture together? The telcos are doing their part. In fact, I will give credit to the telcos because they have invested a lot of money. We are talking about Momo right now because one telco took upon themselves to invest money over 15 years before we started seeing Momo, benefits, and now we are charging transfer levy, right? It's a private sector driven. How much did MTN benefit, for example, from government? They pay almost 45% in taxes. What is that money used for in developing the ecosystem and building the bigger picture Salom mentioned? NCA gets 1% from revenue from telcos before even GIFEC, 2% before taxes. How much are they investing into building the bigger picture and bringing stakeholders on board and saying, okay, how do we format the Greek sector? How do we format education? How do we format health? How do we format tax collection? If we're able to scale all these various sectors, collecting taxes will be the last thing on, or the last problem of government, because everybody will be within the bracket and you can charge them. Facebook makes a lot of money from Ghana. How much is government getting from Facebook? During the election, right, between August to December, 2 political parties spent almost $280,000 in just Facebook adverts alone. How much did we get? I'm sure we didn't get anything. And all these things must be looked at. If you have the bigger picture, all the various components, especially private sector, we will to drive that. And then let's teach the young people technology, digital skills. Let's the schools start reformatting their system of education using technology solutions so that we don't need to go and train 6,000 girls because it's government policy.
Okay. Now, you asked a very important question. How much did government get? The GRA man is here, Isaac Amakon. Yes. Yes. He's talking about the bigger picture, and he concludes on a very important note. The political parties spent $280,000. How much did government get out of all of that?
I wouldn't know right now, but let me go straight and also talk about the bigger picture. One of the things we expect, especially when it comes to ease of doing business, is that it shouldn't cost you more when you are paying for taxes and also when you are getting some government services. Today, I don't know those who can compare how we used to go and queue at the GRA offices before last year, 2021. That is even before COVID. And now, how payments are done. I don't know whether that is not part of the bigger picture, that you can sit anywhere in the world and pay your taxes. And that has been done in record time. That is a plus which I believe it is part of the bigger picture. Filing of taxes. Today, you're able to sit at the comfort of your home and be able to file your taxes. One other thing we can add to the bigger picture is that prior to we integrating with the NIA, what is the taxpayer base? We were looking at somewhere around 2 million. Today, we have a potential of about 15 million thanks to data cross-referencing between GRA and the NIA. When you pick others, what do you call the paperless port, the time it took you to do prior to the paperless and now, all these are, as Doc have said, you need to have the building blocks, the foundation for the private sector to be able to build on. And some of these building blocks were not in existence. how were you even applying for your passport? How long was it taking? And now. So these are all part of the bigger picture that I believe we can add to the success story of digitizing the economy.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Isaac Amwakon. I'll get back to you shortly. But let me acknowledge the presence of the Ghana FinTech Association. They're here. Thank you very much for joining us. We also have the General Secretary of the Mobile Money Agents Association of Ghana, MSoft is here. The European Union is also here, and the Embassy of Colombia is also represented here, and Dreamoval as well. Thank you for joining us. Let me get back to you, Selom, because I want us to look at how digital drive, how we can, take advantage of Africa's rising digital economy. How prepared is Ghana's private sector to do that?
I think historically, historically, when it comes to adoption of technology, Ghana has always been one of the first. I mean, if you look at, I sent my first ever email back in 1993 when I was in lower sixth form. What do you call it? That was when Ghana, NCS. Yeah. This is a time when a lot of African countries didn't even know what landlines were. We have really gone ahead in terms of innovation, and we are one of the beacons in Africa. Personally, my company, for example, has deployed in 10 countries in Africa, Pop Out, etc. And lots of my friends in the Ghanaian technology space have actually gone on and implemented solutions outside Ghana. So when it comes to technology, I think Ghanaians are one of those that if you look at things like the big markets, mobile penetration, penetration into rural areas, presence of digital infrastructure. If you look at all of those indices or you look at all those boxes, I think Ghana ticks a lot of them. And a lot of this has been down to the relentless effort by private sector players to actually lay boots on the ground. We have been very relentless and sacrificed quite a lot. And I would say to Isaac and to your friends at the GRA that one of the things that the GRA should be doing is to engage technology companies more instead of just seeing them as points to be taxed. We have a lot in terms of the benefits that we offer society beyond just paying taxes. And I think that official approach where we are always just chased around and anytime you hear good news about, let's say, MTN or any of these other guys, is that, oh, they paid X amount of taxes this year, and that is good. No, you should talk about the direct benefits they are offering people in terms of easing business opportunities. And one of the biggest things that we have to talk about is inclusion. Ghana is primed for a lot of inclusion. Digital financial service inclusion, education, e-education, e-health, huge areas where we have a lot of potential, areas in terms of things like land ownership, in terms of securing capital. These are areas where digitization would have very huge transformative effects. But then we cannot have that aspirational approach if we still have a system where there is very little in terms of cohesion between those who make and implement policies and civil society players and all the other actors in the system. Because if we want an inclusive society that is primed to take advantage of digitization, it means that the digitalization must reflect the aspirations of the people. Okay. The aspirations of the people include economic empowerment, include security, include social security, include improving the level of trust and minimizing business risk in terms of transactions, in terms of engagements, in terms of even how capital is acquired. We all know, for example, now that our banks are one of the laziest in terms of the way they approach business. And I'll be very, very blunt about it, because all they do is lend to government and leave the private sector alone. And this is inimical to any kind of transformative development this nation is going to have. And if we have our digitization approach such that it reduces the risk in terms of how businesses can access capital, for example, if there is a 5-year approach that looks at all the problems and underlines them and works towards solving these problems to improve trust in doing business alone, using digital methods, then the 300,000 agents that Isaac has, the extra revenue that has will pale in comparison with the level of growth and development this nation will have.
Okay. So, Salam, when we look at preparedness of Ghana's private sector to take advantage of Africa's rising digital economy, how prepared would you say we are?
Are we primed? Are we prepared?
Are we?
200% yes.
Somebody says 200%, another says 500%. What do you say, Maximus? Before I get to Isaac Amwakwen, I want him to prepare that he'll be addressing a question on, how connected Ghana's digitalization drive is to her business and investment climate. I'll be coming to you shortly. But tell me.
400%.
How did you come by that?
Yeah, an average.
But tell me if you... Salam has talked about a lot of challenges. And so based on those challenges, I think 200, 500, 400 are on the high.
No, we see we are always ready. The issue is that, you see, if I have an idea and I need funding, in other countries, somebody with 10 million will not go to the bank to deposit it for maybe treasury bills. Maybe they will invest 5 million in 10 startups. In 5 years' time, one startup will be bought for maybe 500 million, and they will get almost 10 times or 100 times the investment. But in Ghana, you can't go to the bank for any funding. The venture capital money is not there, and if it's there, it's very expensive. The banks, of course, now they are feeling the bite of Momo, and they are also trying to innovate. I have a concept. I think that if they don't support startups or even invest in fintechs, very soon the banks, their sector will not be profitable. Very soon, from all this branchless banking, right, cashless banking to branchless banking, they are reducing it, and then we have Momo running, retail banking coming. ECD is in the system. Very soon, the banks will be like an app sitting on the server at the central bank, and we have a bankless banking system. And technology is going to do that, trust me. If they don't invest in startups so that they can own a share of somebody who is designing a solution for the insurance company, insurance sector, or fee payment and all that, very soon your bank will not be relevant. Okay. So the first issue is the, of course, cost of capital, and then the private sector funding ideas for their own survival.
Thank you, Maximus. Before I get to you, Dr. Blay, let me acknowledge the presence of Professor Akila Basoya, who is a former Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana and also a former President of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. Let's give him a round of applause. He wants to make a point. Why not? Please go ahead.
Sir, sorry for interrupting your well-organized flow of discussion. I was just wondering, at what point do we talk about the fourth industrial revolution? The discussion so far has been focusing on digital ID and its impact, and hanging around the revenue generation, making banks better and so on all the time, which is fine. My understanding is that industrial revolution has to do with transforming production, raising productivity, using AI, and all these varied ways of doing things. And I'm just wondering, to what extent can a raw material production and export country talk about the fourth industrial revolution? Just a question. Thank you.
Thank you. But now that you've raised a question, now that you've asked a question, I am also curious. I want to ask you a very simple one. Why are you wondering? Please tell us, why are you wondering? How, a third world country, as Porter could be talking about the fourth industrial revolution? Yes.
I'm not wondering. I'm asking us to address that question.
Okay. Okay, so we started by talking about it. We certainly would get back to it. Thank you very much, Professor Akila Kwasoya. But let me get to you, Isaac. I was asking you a question, about how Ghana's digitalization drive is connected to its business and investment climate. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll pick inspiration from what Prof have said. I believe some building blocks need to exist for these new and emerging technology to be able to build on. Even the AI and the Internet of Things and the blockchain, they would need some digital building blocks to be able to use. We are basically or mostly an analog economy, and we need to get some of our analog infrastructure into digital infrastructure. Then we can digitalize once we have it in a digital form. Let me pick a case like registration of land and land title. It's been something which has been very difficult because it has been mostly analog. Now you see that there is a project that is converting these analog documents into a digital form. And once that is done successfully, you would be able to do some building blocks on them. Currently, if you are paying your stamp duty, hitherto it's purely manual. Now, thanks to digitalization, you go to the Lands Commission, the GRA. We used to have our staff go there manually and take this stamp duty. Now we've taken our staff off because it is digital. You go to Lands Commission, you go through their process, you provide your Ghana card, and voila. So it looks like somebody is not picking all these goodies that has been done and telling people that, look, there is some gold or diamond somewhere that we can make use of. And we seem to be looking at the problem and putting our hands in the air as if nothing is being done. But I believe, as I've said earlier, ease of doing business. We are cutting down the time it takes to register your business at the Registrar General. We are cutting the time it takes to pay your taxes. We are reducing the cost of paying taxes to the government. We are making sure when you are paying taxes, there's no e-levy on it. When you are buying things online, no e-levy on it. When you are transferring your funds for mobile money vendor, no e-levy on it. So there is a conscious effort to also make sure that the digitization agenda stay on focus.
Great. Let me get to you, Dr. Gaston Blay. So you've talked about the model. You've talked about what you intend to achieve. Now, how are all these going to enhance productivity and production?
All right. Thank you very much. So I want to take it back on the African rising digital economy. Mm-hmm. It's all about market share, right? And so here you have the M pedigrees. You have to go to different countries to establish themselves and compete for a smaller market share. It's a bit more difficult. We all know that as far as digitization is concerned, those borders and boundaries are not important, but just the legal regime make it difficult. So this is an area that I think IMANI and others have to start looking at. How can you begin to look at removing those legal barriers? Because usually these are the ones that make it difficult to execute. As far as technology is concerned, within the context of the fourth industrial revolution, you're looking at taking mature products and combining them for a solution at a very fast pace. But sometimes the legalities make it difficult to solve small problems that have bigger impact. And these are some of the challenges I think the IT industry, local IT industries, and the civil society organization, partnering government can begin to look at. Now, you also have to look at the transfer of funds. Last year, the central banks of Africa, even this year, when the African Development Bank met, the Board of Governors met here in Accra, they're talking about establishing these interoperability between the central banks using their payment platforms within Africa, so that way you're going to have the seamless movement of funds from one country to another, also helping the African IT companies and businesses be able to leverage over the AFCFTA platform and also speed up their prosperity as businesses. So Mr. Maximus mentioned something about we need to educate, we need to increase the type of, we need to improve the type of education that we have in Ghana. And then picking back on that, the government understand that when you talk about big picture. The skill set of tomorrow resides in the STEM area, because the fourth industrial revolution is not only IT, right? You're looking at using the physical space, using digitization, and using biology, right? Combining them to provide solutions, right? This is like the overall, the highest level of definition of fourth industrial revolution. So government knowing that, as we speak right now, they've secured funding for 40 STEM academies, which will host about 3,000 students each, focused on STEM, right? Where they come in there and science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. The concept of data science and all this stuff as one of the pillars of the fourth industrial revolution is all about mathematics and statistics and programming, right? We need to build that skill. STEM academies today exist in Bosomtwen, Jachi, Abomonso, Pasengpe, are ready for operation, right? Not tomorrow, ready today. And also then the STEM academies will have computer science and robotics as core classes, thereby increasing our ability to produce STEM professionals in the near future. So there are a lot of activities that the Ministry of Education, again, when you talk about STEM, it's not only digitization, not only IT, it's still within the concept of the fourth industrial revolution. There are a lot more, but I will not bore you with the details. Just giving those 4 things, and I'll proceed from there. So now you're looking at agric sector, right? You're looking at tools, producing machines. You're looking at the energy sector. You're looking at all these, even trade at the port, as Isaac mentioned. How do we integrate these components from the physical to the digital and then leverage on fourth industrial revolution? We have to first create that space. Data protection must be very important, because we're talking about moving of data, right? So the Data Protection Commission has to be strengthened, right? Tools that they need and the collaboration that they need have to be there, so that we understand that because data is moving from one machine to another, doesn't mean that somebody can easily pry it and start causing mischief. Now you're looking at the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation.
Okay.
That is an area that we have to look at when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution. The education, the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation, the Ministry of Communication and Digitization. These 3, last year, November 2021, had a Innovation Week. And the whole idea is to bring the collaboration to the front. You're talking about bringing academia down, right? You're talking about bringing the engineers to the table. You're also looking at bringing government to the table and saying that, okay, where are the areas, what are the policy changes that we need to make? What are the regulatory framework that we need to lose or strengthen to make sure that the industry, the private sector, as they set up their factories, as they set up their machines, as they order new machines, what are the type of machines they need to begin to bring, so that in 5 years' time, these machines will be leveraged on the fourth industrial revolution. So these are conversations that are ongoing. I think the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology, and Innovation will eventually engage with all the stakeholders. But
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, let me bring you in, Maximus. What do you say? The same question.
I think is what he mentioned is a brilliant idea, but I want a general adoption of STEM, right? From basic to university level. It shouldn't be models, right? We should adopt a syllabus that will cut across, so that we will not just create a bracket of people that, okay, I'm STEM trained, and he's the only person who will get the opportunity to be employed in other jobs instead of the other general students populace. So let's adopt the same model, right? Or create a core course that most of the universities or secondary schools or primary schools should start learning, so that when I'm studying IT, I'm just not doing hardware. The soft components of IT, I understand that, right? We need to be able to do that. And then the government, the bigger picture you seem to be painting, please frame it for all of us to see so that we know where we can all fit in. And then the interoperability, we shouldn't just focus on local stuff. How can I put the GPS address into an Amazon, checkout form so that they know they can deliver this into me right here in Ghana? How do I do that? If I'm filling a form, you see other African countries, Ghana is not included. How do we make sure our name is also within those basic stuff on the internet? And I think the digital skills for me is very core to all the industrial revolution we are talking about. If the people don't understand the concept of digitalization and the design component of technology, the STEM models will start nicely, and then the next moment we need funding for it, and then the next moment it becomes a case study that was successful years ago. So let's be deliberate, I think, about it, and let's change the style of education. We are very late. All this digitalization we are talking about, taxis and addressing system, those are old technology stuff.
Well,
Thank you. Please hold on.
We still need lawyers. We still need musicians. We still need artists. But I just wanted to add something.
No, please hold on. I'll get back to you. Don't worry. I'll get back to you. I need to go to Professor Bobking. He needs to make a point quickly. But let me acknowledge the presence of Captain Budus Kumson, who's CEO of Nexus Consulting and a board member of IMANI. Just give us a wave if you're here. Okay. Thank you very much. And also Enoch Kwesi-Jetuan, who is Executive Director of the Ghana National Council of Private Schools. Thank you very much for joining us. And Richard Husman, who of GIZ. GIZ have been collaborating and sponsoring IMANI's private sector dialogues, such as the one we're having now. Thank you very much, Richard, for joining us. Yes, Professor Bobkin, you want to make a point? Please come in.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. So just a quick one. And oftentimes where we get it wrong is because we aren't starting from a framework that has everybody at that negotiation table. So that we begin to see how we fact check each other and see the best way to deploy an intervention. And I will show you where our government is getting it wrong. Why do you want to build SEM schools? To rival Achimota, rival Infantipim, rival Presec? What is the goal? STEM is not a replacement for life. It's an integration. Yeah. How do you use it to change the old production method? Right. If it helps you to create new production methods, great. Why? In fact, and you will see that we may spend far less integrating this STEM within the established school system than going to build one in my village. I'm not sure I'm sending my daughter there. So then, if you look at it from that way, then you are looking at the linkages from kindergarten all the way through the universities. Within a certain system that we know had worked, we can use it to improve that. And you may spend less, and you still gain more. So I'm finding it a bit difficult to understand why we are counting number of STEM schools. This is not how we count productivity anymore. We are not counting building blocks. We are looking at the integration and the linkages and the value creation that gets along. And I think we need to go back to that conversation. Other than that, and that is why in this country, we find that with our limited money, we spend money in collecting data here in silos, collect here, and then later spend money and say, how do we put all of that word together when we could have started from the word go? And said, this is how we look with one paper, collect the data, and everybody else is what? Look at the number of queues we've been going through in this country. Queues for SIM card re-registration and SIM card re-registration. Come on, please.
All right.
So that is where the missing thought really is. And if you get that wrong, you will spend much more money correcting something that is clearly avoidable. And we keep making these mistakes. I'm sorry. Then the last point, the digitization, let's not deploy it as a tool. It's a whole economy, right? And if you look at digitization as an economy, you want to conceptualize it and the value chain, then you realize that it's bigger than what we're actually talking about here. Thank you.
Professor Godfred Bobking.
intervention on the curriculum, because I had a lot. I didn't want to list them all, but one point I want to
make it brief, because we need to get to the other persons to share their views.
One of the things that is here is redesign the curriculum to ensure a STEM focus. All Ghanaian SHS students will take a minimum of 2 years of biology, chemistry, and physics. The addition, the Ministry of Education is working on to ensure a 60-40 science to humanities ratio. Okay, so I wanted to make that point. Yes, it's true that we need to make sure we have a lot more, but the vision, the objective has to be stated out there, and then you work towards it, right? So I just wanted to intervene.
Okay, Salam. Before we get to the other participants, briefly, yes.
Professor Kelakba put in a very big curveball into the conversation. Nobody has seemed to be able to address his concern. So I've seen that he's been looking down and smiling.
I'm trying.
Well, why would a third world country like ours be concerned about the fourth industrial revolution? Well, let me put it this way, or let's create a scenario. Today, my son is 8 years old. Today is his birthday. In 2040, he would be a young man. He would be probably, 26 years old? What is his position in the world in terms of how he can compete with a child who was born in Singapore or South Korea or Mexico City or Bali, Indonesia, or Perth, Australia? How is he going to have the ability to compete with them in terms of skills, in terms of knowledge, in terms of productivity, in terms of what his abilities are? This is the question that probably he was asking. And this is the end game that we should all begin to look at. By 2040 to 2050, Africa's population would have doubled. Our current dependency ratio is such that 65% of Africans today are below the age of 35 years old. And we are the only continent on the world with a constant 2.5% population increase year on year. What it means for us as Ghanaians, and what it means for us in the future dispensation, if we want to look in the crystal ball, is that we should have Ghanaian private enterprise being one of those providing the necessary skills, tools, innovations, and solutions for a continent that is going to hit an optimal level of performance, productivity, and economic relevance within the next 30 years. We will have to look at how we are building our economy to take advantage of the African free trade area, and how we can build borderless skill sets such that we can run virtual productive activity that impacts not only our 30 or 60 million population in 2040, but the near 2 billion population across Africa, as well as having that economic relevance across the world. Because let me give you a glimpse of how the future is like. A lot of things that we see today as entrenched pillars of our life are going to be completely transformed. Today, when I was born, my mom is a stenographer secretary, or she was trained as a stenographer secretary. How many of you know who that is? She worked in a typing pool. How many typing pools exist today? Her job function within the last 30 years has gone completely obsolete. She spent years learning shorthand. How many of you know anybody physically who knows shorthand? It's not there. A lot of job functions are going to be obsolete within the next 10, 20 years because we have AI, we have big data, we have big tools that are going to transform all of that. Governance is going to change. We are at a point where we are very close to the tipping point of where technology is going to run governance and in ways in which it's going to improve transparency completely. Are we building our digitization structures and solutions to begin to take cognizance of these things? We are at a situation or at a dispensation where we are just on the point where technology is going to decentralize decision making. However, in all our policy decisions, we are rather doubling back. That's the word, right? We are doubling back on centralization. We are doubling back on one pillar where everybody comes in, and we are and our policy, even our policy definition and our policy design is such that it is top down, instead of looking at how the world is transforming in peer-to-peer relationships. We should not even look at it from bottom up or top down anymore. It is peer-to-peer. That is the future. That is why things like trustless systems are developing. That is why blockchain is developing. And these things are going to change how we do things from just being a participator to having a proof of stake, for example. Everybody has a stake, and technology is enhancing that democratization agenda where everybody is going to be included. Now, the big question we should ask ourselves is, and when I said a big picture, I was saying that how do we build our systems right now? How do we create that mentality? How do we design everything we do to understand that we are going to be in a situation in the very near future where we might have spent millions of dollars building capacity, building this, building that, building this, and then we'll be completely obsolete and irrelevant by 2025, by 2030, by 2040, because we have not even put into our minds how the future is going to look like. And that is the question, and that is where I think we should be focusing our thoughts on what the big picture should look like. Professor.
Thank you very much, Selim Brantier. And thank you, Dr. Blay. Thank you, Professor Akilakpa-Sawyerr. Thank you, Maximus, and thank you, Isaac. And also thank you, Professor Bob King. It's now the turn of all of you. And so if you want to ask a question, you want to make a contribution, just show, we'll get a microphone to you. But we'll get the Association of FinTech, Ghana FinTech. I think that you want to make a point, Martin, briefly, yes, before I get back to all of you. Yes, Martin, coming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this platform. And my name is Martin Kwame-Awaga, and I represent the Ghana FinTech and Payments Association. First of all, I think the reason why Dr. Akilakpa asked this question is because of the topic for which we are all deliberating on this evening. I think it's very loaded. And so I'm suggesting that next time or going forward, we should kind of like drill it down so we can take the discussions one after the other. But at this point, I think sometimes we are all overlapping when it comes to this kind of discussions and forum. But this is very laudable, and I'll commend IMANI and GIZ for putting it together. I think we have shared a lot of perspectives, very laudable ideas coming in from the private sector and then the public as well. And in as much as I represent the fintechs, I do not want to just curtail or, talk about how the e-tax is affecting our business. And, making some of us close down and all of that. But I want to take it, look at it from a very holistic perspective. That is how the whole digitalization agenda is helping in terms of how, the private sector is leading these initiatives. I mean, you've all clearly stated that. And I think going forward, a lot of these discussions must be tabled before the private sector. I think we need a lot of that involvement in the decisions that government makes. I think it will be prudent and it will be better for us all seated here, to know that digitization emerges on the African continent, and economies within Africa, not just Ghana, are, spearheading a lot of innovations, a lot of innovative products, not just in the fintech industry or the finance industry. When you talk about health tech, when you talk about the education sector, when you talk about, trade, logistics, a whole lot of things are changing rapidly. And Selim aptly puts that to bear for us. And I think this this is the beginning of great things. But I would like to also categorically state that, I think going forward, we should put together a framework paper that can help us understand how things are going to be in the innovative or the digital sphere 10 or 20 years from now. I think that is needed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. Yes, let me get to you.
Yeah, my name is Prince Boni. I studied information systems.
Okay.
And I've been practicing it for some time now. Most of my experience is in the health sector and the public organizations.
Okay.
I want to make a contribution, but I'll tell a small story to show what I want to say.
Please do.
Story. Yeah. I was in one of our African countries, East African countries, doing on an assignment, basically. And when I saw a lot of opportunities there, like IT kind of thing like that. So I spoke to one of the guys on our team. Very good. I thought, can we get together and see? Because I saw our problems there, the lands documents, the same thing. I said, can we get together to do things like this? I'm on it. Cool, no problem. But then I said, things like the land commission. He said, no, please, I won't go there. I said, why? He said, my experience, it's my experience with those people. They've got themselves messed up, and they put the problem on me. What was his story? Yeah. There was an advert in the Kenya that they wanted to transform the land management system in the country, basically. So he applied. And they gave him the job. He came and deployed the systems and stuff like that. When he finished, the problem was not gone. And the advert, they said they didn't say they wanted an IT installation. They wanted him to fix the problem.
Okay.
You see, what I'm here, so I've been trying to understand what do you mean by this digitization thing. It looks to me like we've got a solution and we are looking for problems. But the world doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You see, the world doesn't work that way. And I've been trying, many organizations, we've tried to see, moving from a manual system to a digitized system is more than computer sciences. Far more. And the way we are talking as if, you see, if we knew the number of failures in IT projects, we talk as if they are all successes. Unfortunately, the failures are more than the success. The money they put in and goes down the drain. So once a country, we need to take a step back, look at our systems again. The change management systems, you need to transform a manual system into an IT system. It's very risky. Currently in the health sector, they say they are doing and paperless system and stuff like that. And I said, wait a minute. In a health system, it's not a banking system. It's not. This is a health subsystems in a health system. That's what they are. They said that we want paperless. I said, do you have printers? They say yes. I said, when you print, what do you do with them? The paper. They said, but we are going paperless. I said, wait a minute. So what I'm trying to say is that, please, IT technology is a means to an end. It's supposed to improve our productivity and stuff like that. And every system analyst knows that if we install a computer-based system in an organization, if something doesn't change drastically, something went wrong. And most of the thing has nothing to do with the technology. It is the change management which is the problem. And I think, Ghana, that is our biggest problem. You see, the last time we were talking about, let me just finish. Finally, we are trying to talking about the last meeting we had, budget overrun and stuff like that with technology and things. If we could fix it, this thing could have fixed the problem for us. Our processes are simply not just good. We got process problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank IMANI Ghana for putting this discussion together and all the panel members that shared their views. In fact, I side with Salom on some of the issues that he made. We are in the country which we have not really focused on low-hanging fruits that we can dwell on it to really transform our country. And it is true that government is really promoting digitization to really amass wealth from the masses, rather than ensuring or tapping all the necessary avenues to transform this country. I'm coming from education side, so I want to highlight on that. You know, in 2018, we decided as a country to change our curriculum. And in that, we centered on digital literacy. So based on the curriculum framework, it's supposed to have 50% classroom work and 50% outside classroom work to ensure that all the core competencies that we want to achieve, we can achieve that. Luckily enough, COVID came and we closed down all our schools. We closed down all our schools because the classroom is so needed in such a way that without the classroom, we cannot deliver education. When we were doing the training for the teachers, we have to count all the teachers in a single particular area before we can deliver the teacher training programs. What are we doing? Now, recently, we spent a lot of money to conduct assessment, which is on digital literacy. And the assessment that we conducted, that is the NSAT, which we could have tapped in there to really spend out the kind of digitization or the digital literacy that we are talking about it from that point. Because if we really want to transform this country, I would say that all our age group, we will do whatever we want to do, but our main aim is supposed to be the young ones who are the KG, the nursery. We have to inject them with this kind of thinking in terms of digital literacy and what Professor Sawyer said, the fourth industrial revolution. Because they will be the people who will be able to pick the competencies that are needed to do this kind of things. But as we were assessing a curriculum that is enshrined or underpins digital literacy, we still use our orthodox method of assessment. And as we speak now, we've written about 6 months now, we have not been able to know the score of that assessment.
6 months.
6 months now. Because we did it in November. So it is very, very important for us to understand that we need to, we have to shift our attention from revenue mobilization through digitization and really touch the ground. Okay. Do a lot of consultation with, let's say, ICT types of guys who are in the system so that they can really hone into the system and support what we want to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. And let me also acknowledge the presence of the president of the Ghana Institute of Procurement and Supply, Collins Ajiman Sapong. If you're here, kindly give us a wave. Thank you very much, Collins. And I'm told that the General Secretary of the Mobile Money Agents Association of Ghana wants to make a point. Please go ahead and make the point.
Right, so good evening to all of you, and I must say a big thank you to IMANI for organizing such a program which seeks to bring out data to enable policymakers to better reshape the controversial e-levy and other important subjects regarding government's digitization agenda. I think throughout the discussion, we kept on talking about putting in infrastructure, and for that matter, the blocks that will facilitate this digitization drive. But in the face of it all, you need a session of people who also help to push this agenda or this financial inclusion, and then for that matter, the digitized agenda forward. And that is the agent network. It is an open knowledge that as agents, we are faced with a number of issues. We are faced with a lot of challenges. And the basis or the success of this digitization agenda or drive all depends on the availability of these agents out there. And so the big question is, as policymakers keep on, bringing out policies that will influence the ecosystem, what are the measures that policymakers are also putting in place to ensure that these agents out there are safe to do their business with the ultimate of helping government to, digitalize the economy? That is a bigger concern to all of us, unless of course someone will say that the agents network do not play a major role in the government digitization agenda. Okay. The issue on table now is about e-levy. Over 300,000 agents. Should these agents consider, pulling out their investment on grounds that they are poorly remunerated, their security, access to funding to, expand the business, other government policies that are not really helpful to the business. It is something that, most of these policies coming from government will really be heavily impacted. And so going forward, just like my colleague from the FinTech has indicated, it is proper that we engage all the relevant stakeholders in whatever policy that is coming on board, so that some of these hullabaloo or concerns and then the challenges that the e-levy implementation confronted, some of these things will also be a thing of the past. And then again, the policy must be such that in the end, it is rather coming to project businesses of people and not rather to, sink us deep, into the mud.
Okay.
The Bank of Ghana data that was just currently presented to us only revealed that, the e-levy is actually impacting so much on us. And I think it is a shot in government's own foot to, achieve that digital economy that we are envisaging. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, let's get to the next question.
Thank you very much. I'm Nathaniel Dramina from the Institute for Liberty and Policy Innovation. I'll start with what Martin Abrantier said. I think I agree with him when he said that the private sector begins with the initiative and the government only comes there to tax the gains out. So it's like anytime the government looks at the private sector, it's all about taxing how they can tax them, but rather not how they can develop the private sector. And one thing also that Dr. Augustine mentioned that is also helpful was how they link the data and make sure that individuals can get a correct identity and then know your tax you are even supposed to pay. I think that is great because as part of taxation principles, it must not cost the taxpayer in paying tax. And so if it is easy for you to pay your tax and you know how much you are even owing, sometimes if you are supposed to even go to an ordeal before you know how much you are owing, you see like middlemen before you get to know, facilitate your process for you to just pay your tax. Sometimes it's tedious and you have to just come back and decide not to participate in the whole process at all. And so that is very significant. However, in the discussion on all this digitization, I'll look at two things. That is cost and then internet connectivity. If you look at the gains that the fintech industry is gaining with respect to scalability, it's because most of them are running on the USSD platforms. If you look at initiatives that are built on web apps, you realize that connectivity becomes something for them. So you have to focus your initiative or your solutions for the society in urban areas. Meanwhile, you have people in the rural areas who might also use it. And so in facilitating the business environment with digitization, we must also look at access. I think there are some areas that if you open office and you go to MTN, you cannot get Wi-Fi connectivity or the optic fiber there just because of your location. And I think that is also critical when we are looking at digitization. Then the final one has to do with cost. With the interoperability system that was put in place, you realize that it took time for the cost to even be at par with the current system. And so if you create a platform that's supposed to integrate systems and the cost on that platform is higher than the existing system, I think it defeats the purpose of access, because with what we are having already is cheaper and your new system is rather expensive. We may, in terms of adopting innovation, we may not adopt, but rather staying at where we were. And so I think those things must be taken into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much. Unfortunately, we can't have any other contribution or question. Unfortunately. Please bear with us. We need to wrap it all up. And so I'll give you the final word, final comments. Professor Godfred Bobking, you would have your closing remarks. It's been a great conversation, but that's all time would allow us. So you give us your closing remarks and I'll wrap it up.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think we've been talking about IMANI coming out with the innovations, but I think there are some people funding it. So we want to also appreciate GIZ for the funding. The reason I'm saying so is that we have come to appreciate the value of research, but I'm not too sure we put our money on the table to fund it. So it's good that we are getting this collaboration, but of course, we're forcing the game. So I think that I believe that there's a lot more that we could have done with this, particularly in terms of the fourth industrial revolution. Remember, it's a revolution. It's not just one thing. So I believe that the conversation will continue and all of that. I think going forward, what I've come to realize here is that we need to engage. Policymakers, government, private sector, we need to engage. We must look at this as growing a bigger pie. And now the digitization is a pie. We could make it bigger, and if government takes, let's say, 5% of a bigger pie, it's probably much more than seeking to take 40% of a smaller pie, or if you take everything. So let's look at it from that way. And at some point in time, we need to package our tax handles as an enabler, okay, and use it to cut private sector. We must do that. That way, when the investment matures, you also get a fair deal. And I believe that we should also be looking at the digitization within a certain whole economy and value chain and see how the various players fit into that across the various segments of society, from education that has implication for labor market outcome and the rest of them. And I believe that a lot of these things, and also look at the whole procurement of the digitization drive from the seat of government, right? And all of that, and see how private sector also fits in within greater perspective of transparency and disclosure. They all matter, because trust is important. One of the things technology can do is to undermine trust in government institutions and democratic institutions, and by the time you realize, this whole thing could be a zero-sum game. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Professor Godfrey Bucking, Fellow of IMANI, and that'll be all from us. Thank you so much. We're live on the Joy News channel. My name is Winston Amwa. Do have a lovely evening and a video. And of course, the conversation would continue in here. Thank you very much.